Okay. Well, we had the Proyecto Espeleologico Sistema Huautla, PESH we call it, that's the acronym, 2015 expedition. It ran for 6.5 weeks from the last part of March until the first part of May. Highly successful. I'm gonna say probably the most ambitious and most successful expedition organized, caving expedition organized by Americans this year. I'm going to be bold and say that. We had 47 people total, never more than 24 people at one time. 3 of us were there for the entire time. We drove down, we set up the expedition, we drove back 6.5 weeks later. Only 3 people out of 47 were there the entire time. Everybody else was there for 5 weeks or 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, even 1 week. There were some people that could just come in for 1 week. So they flew in, went caving intensely, flew home. Those 47 people were from 7 countries. Like, for instance, of course, the United States and Mexico, but Australia, Poland, United Kingdom, Switzerland, and so on. We had a good team, really strong team. We had no injuries. Well, we had 1 minor injury. Somebody fell in a cave and thought maybe they broke their wrist, but they didn't, and they got themselves out. So in my mind, when it's a self-rescue and somebody gets themselves out, it's not really an injury because you know, they made it out on their own. That's what counts. One really nice thing that happened this year that isn't the sort of thing that you're looking for and isn't the sort of thing that you expect, but you love it when it happens, and that is 2 different people from other parts of the world, one from United Kingdom, meaning England, and one from Australia, came to me and said, I do believe that Sistema Huautla is the best cave in the world. And it's been about 25 years ago that I was told something like that I've never forgotten, and I've even put it into print, something I wrote, and that was that the famous European caver Philippe Royer came to Huautla in 1987, and I didn't even see him on the surface at all. I was camping deep underground, and he visited down there with a few people and toured the cave. They were in the area, and he was a legend. He's deceased now. He died in a mountaineering accident later. But he was a legend. I certainly knew his name. And he came up to me in an underground camp and he said, with his very strong German-Swiss accent, he said, I do believe this is the most magnificent cave on earth. Well, we've found stuff since then, and I wish he was around to see it. We had a long list of objectives this year. So we went into the field with a long list of things we wanted to accomplish. And they went from 2 major leads, and a lead in a cave means it's the beginning of unexplored passage. That's a lead, like a reporter's lead on a story. It's a lead in a cave. And we had 2 major leads, and they were both way back in the caves. So we had 2 caves going at once, 2 major deep caves that are actually part of Sistema Huautla. Sistema means system, so it's a vast cave system with 20 entrances, and there's a way from one cave to the other, but extremely deep, and you got to know the way to actually do something like that, and you'd have to have all the ropes rigged 2 different ways to go in one and out the other. Anyway, we had 2 fronts, if you will. It's like a mountaineering expedition where they're climbing 2 mountains at the same time. There's a safety aspect to that, and that is if you got a strong enough team on the expedition to do 2 caves, then you are prepared for one team to help the other if they got a problem. If there's a rescue necessary, You got a strong team over here with all the ropes, all the gear. All you got to do is communicate with them, get them out of there, and they can come help. We didn't need that this year. But we had one cave that was rigged down to 700 meters. Now 700 meters in feet is about 2,300 feet. And it takes even more rope than that to get there, because you got horizontal traverses and you got rigging that uses rope. So I would say that probably takes about 4,000 feet of rope to go that deep. It takes a whole week to get those ropes in place, fixed lines like they call it on a tall mountain. And so we got the cave rigged, we had an underground camp, we had to take scuba gear down that deep, and from that underground camp we had a team of strong cave divers. And I mean, they're diving underwater where there's absolutely no light and nobody's ever been there before. So they got to be really good to explore ahead, and you sure don't want to get lost underwater, because you got a clock ticking the whole time. You got to get out while you still got air. And that was a lead, if you will, that we saw in 1979 and had not been back. It's hard to get there, and we got there this year. And what happened on the other side of 3 sumps? We didn't know how deep they'd be, how long they'd be, so we were armed for bear, if you will. We were ready for whatever depth, whatever length. Well, they weren't long and they weren't deep. They were only 30 meters, which is about 100 feet. There were 2 of them like that, and then there was one that was about 15 feet or 7 meters. That's less than that, 4 meters. And on the other side, it just went up and up and up and up. And the team that climbed that using direct aid to climb just up and up and up shafts that had never been seen before, even though they're probably millions of years old, never been seen before, they came out of there saying that it was difficult because of the noise, because it was just deafening constantly, waterfalls roaring past them. They had to shout to communicate, and they just went up and up and up and up and up, 180 meters in height, which is about 600 feet, and it just keeps going up, but it's extremely remote to be there. You're very deep. You got to go through the underwater passages and then up on the other side. So I don't know that we'll go back that way again. We'll be working on finding entrances that hopefully will come down to there from the surface. We went with a long list of objectives, and that was everything from exploration in those 2 different caves, hoping to discover unexplored passages that would merit such a big effort. We had biologists coming from Mexico City with the university there. They were really excited because they collected 6 new species of totally unknown troglodytic life, meaning cave-adapted life last year. Some spiders and harvestmen and scorpions. Nasty sounding stuff, but it's important to science, especially the scorpions, because turns out about 50,000 people a year die from scorpion stings in the world, and if they find a new species of scorpion, there could be a way to make antivenom that will save lives. And most of them in the Middle East. It'd be nice to do something for them, be friendly. We had paleontologists come from a governmental agency in Mexico City, and boy, are they happy with us, because we've got a significant site where Pleistocene, meaning Ice Age animals, fell into a natural trap, and all their bones are right there, perfectly preserved. And it's probably going to expand the range of where they thought things like giant ground sloths used to live. And it appears that we might have found a bison, an extinct species of bison, Bison antiquus probably, which was a gigantic bison. And that's just weird, because it's not the plains, it's in the mountains of southern Mexico. And if that's what it is, it's like, huh? Why there? It's interesting, you know. But through it all, with a list of stuff to do, as the organizer of an expedition, your goal is to address all of those objectives. But in the back of your mind, you're really hoping for something unexpected. And that's the great thing about cave exploration versus maybe to go climb a mountain again that's been climbed a bunch of times, is you know what you're going to find there. It's been climbed. You got a map that shows you where to go. In a deep cave, you hope for the unexpected. Well, it happened again. 2 years in a row now, we've had significant discoveries where we didn't really expect to have them. And somebody went to check out a lead, but it was a minimal one. Didn't think it probably did much. And the survey that got back to that point had indicated in the notes, maybe nothing much there, but somebody needs to come back. And whoa, you know, unexpected geology. Where we thought the beds of the limestone would be steeply bedded, they weren't. They were horizontal and they were massive, and these big tunnels branched out. And the coolest thing is that only 2 people reached that point because it was late in the expedition. One of them is a very active cave explorer in the United States right now. He's turning up everywhere, West Virginia, New Mexico, Montana. He's getting all over the place. And he's been exploring in Lechuguilla Cave in Carlsbad Caverns National Park. It's not part of Carlsbad Caverns. It was found in the mid-'80s, and it's one of the deepest caves in the United States, one of the longest caves in the United States, and all that's been found since '86. Well, he's been going there. It's also known as maybe having the best formations, stalactites, stalagmites, helictites, all kinds of formations, maybe in the world. Very photogenic. Well, he came out of there saying, guess what? Probably as good, maybe better. And only 2 people saw it, and we're only in there for a few hours. And they had to be careful to map a route through there and then pay attention to following that route back out, because it just branch. You got to be careful to know your way out, because nobody knows where you are. It would be really hard to go look for them, because who knows where they went. You can't follow footprints because a lot of the time it's barren bedrock. There's no footprints there. So bottom line is, we made all of our objectives. Some kind of fizzled out and were disappointing. We had high hopes that it would open up and we'd find a lot of new passages, and there was nothing there. But you don't know until you go and check it out. But then we had this unexpected treat, you know, of a whole new section, which just excites us about going back next year. So here it is. I've been back from the expedition 6 weeks right now, and we're already sending emails all over the place talking about the objectives of next year and, you know, what the dates are. And there's a lot of momentum. It's really rolling. One of the objectives this year, which I will say has never been an objective before to purposely address, was we wanted to get several world-class photographers on the expedition. So I purposely invited people, you know, did everything I could to get the right people there who are building a reputation for themselves. 2 of the excellent photographers that we had this year are aspiring professional photographers who hope to get assignments from National Geographic eventually. And I think both of those guys got their aspirations enhanced by the pictures they took this year, and then what's going to end up happening with those pictures. We had 5 world-class photographers. We had a woman from Poland, Kasia Bernanka, and Kasia is a professional photo editor in Poland for their equivalent of National Geographic and their equivalent of, let's say, Outside Magazine, both. So she makes the decision as to what photographs are going in the magazine. So the woman knows photos, and she carries a beautiful big Canon, and she takes it wherever she goes and packs it up in a Pelican case, and she gets that out, and she's pretty quick with it. People don't groan and say, oh God, gonna take a picture, you know, and it's gonna take a half hour. Boom, 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 really, really efficient with it. Well, she got some good shots, really good shots. We had a guy from Arizona, Stephen Eganor, who's just amazing how good he is, just how the eye he's got and how he sets up lights real quick. And we had another guy from Tennessee, 2 from Tennessee, matter of fact, Matt Tomlinson and Chris Higgins. And one thing we wanted to get good pictures of was this gigantic room that we found years ago. It's incredibly remote. You go to that underground camp 700 meters deep, and then it's beyond there, but not far from there. You can actually do an after-dinner trip, if you will, up to this great big giant room, which is right there. 150-meter rope, and you're in there. And it's like half again the size of a dome stadium. Like, you know, name the dome stadium. It's half again that big, like the Cowboy Stadium in Dallas. Half again that big. And it's silent, and it's perpetual darkness, and it's got world-class formations in it. And really, we only had one good picture of it through the years. One good one. It's a good one. But it had 21 flashes And it's misleading because there's only 3 people in that picture setting 7 flashes off in a time exposure. So when somebody sees it, they go, whoa, how many people do you have in there? Well, it looks like there's 21 people in there, right? It's 3. Good picture, but there could be better. So we wanted, in fact, we got 4 of the 5 photographers into that room for them to give it their best shot. My opinion is, and I don't think I've seen all the pictures yet, but Chris Higgins knocked it out of the park. He just took a picture that just, you can't hardly look away from when you see it. I mean, it is just like mind-blowing. And it looks like he's only got 4 big flash bulbs in it. And I'm talking about the size of light bulbs, but big ones. And it's just genius how he placed the light. And interestingly enough, he had somebody up pretty close. I'm saying maybe less than 100 feet. So they're setting a big flash off and silhouetting themselves, and it's just crisp as can be, that silhouette. And that just gives you the scale of how immense this thing is. Once you see that silhouette, then you realize the other 3 have got silhouettes too, but they're diminishing in size until the one in the distance is just like an ant way over there. Beautiful, beautiful photograph. Now, I don't know that this is 100% certain, but I think that Steve Eganor from Arizona is going to end up with a photograph of his being used by Johnny Walker Scotch, because, and that is just like, he told me a couple of days ago that it looks like it's going to happen, and that is career boosting like you can't imagine. If he's a photographer and he can say, "Do you see that ad? That's my picture." Now, how did that happen? Well, it just so happens that the Explorers Club is working with Johnny Walker Scotch, who has got a special line of scotch called the Explorers Club Scotch. And they're going to be advertising, and they were looking for some pictures. And they grabbed onto one of his. So that helps his career. And that's kind of neat, that if you're going to invite young people, and at my age, that's something I'm going to be thinking about. I'm in my mid-60s, and I've been going there for 30-some years. Am I going to be possessive and say, you know, it's mine? And once I quit going, that's it? No, I'm not going to do that. I want to see it continued. So I want younger people getting involved. And this guy's in his 20s. But he's got to earn a living. So here he is saying, you're kidding me. Johnny Walker Scotch wants to use a picture of mine? Yeah, talk to him. You know? Yeah, get paid. It's pretty neat. So we were really happy with the photography this year. And the photography ties into a huge effort that we have conducted now for 2 years. And this year, in a bigger way than last year. And that is, we got public relations to deal with. And the reason is because while underground it's a wilderness, and we're exploring it, we're the first ones to go there, on the surface, it's anything but. A lot of people live up there. And the first road into the area wasn't built until like 50 years ago. So before that, they were remote and almost unknown to be there, almost like the people in the Amazon these days. Who knew they were there? They put a road into the area, everything changed. Now, I've been going there for 38 years, so that's most of that 50. So I've seen things change through the years. There are still people there that don't speak Spanish. They speak Mazateco. And not only that, but they still got the ancient beliefs about what the caves are all about. Imagine that they lived there and all their ancestors have lived there for thousands of years, and here are these great big giant looming caves that sometimes they hear sounds come out of because a rock falls way down in there and it changes its sound by the time it gets to the surface, and they think they heard somebody saying something, or the wind blows in there, whatever. They don't know what's in there. We know what's in there because we've gone in there. But they got their own ideas about what's in there. So where do the two come together? So in dealing with one of the local leaders last year and answering his questions, such as, what if you go in those caves and it upsets the cave spirits and our kids get sick? That was a question I was asked by a local leader that everybody looks up to. Well, that's a hard question to answer. You know, my immediate response probably would have been, that ain't going to happen. The cave spirits aren't going to be upset with us going in there. Well, you got to be gentle how you answer a question like that. So when we dealt with that guy last year on the way back from that village, where the road ends, by the way, and they didn't want the road into the area anyway, but the government said, no, you're going to get a road. So they put a road. So we show up. We want to go in the caves. It's easy for them to say no. So we keep coming back, asking again. And we did last year with a local government leader who spoke both Mazateco, the Indian language, and Spanish. So, you know, we had a translator in between us. And on the way back in the vehicle, he said, you know what you guys ought to do? You ought to put a really nice display up in the government building, because everybody around here at some point goes in that building. They got to get a permit to do something, or it's a local leader who's got to come to a meeting. If you have a nice display in the government building, it will be seen, and you slowly, not in a year, but not in 2 years, but slowly through time, people go through the pictures and they will understand that that's what we see in there. We see these big rooms and waterfalls, and we're actually going just to explore it and take pictures. That's what it comes down to. Well, we did it in a big way. We took that advice. There is a caver that used to live here in Austin, that after he got his degree in film at UT, he went off to LA. He was successful in making documentary films, but his career's changed over the last 20 years, let's say, and he lives in the San Francisco area now. And what does he do? He makes visitor-centered displays for national parks. And I've known him a long time. So I called him up, and I said, Frank, need your help. Well, he said yes. So that went from that phone call to recruiting 2 other people to help. One was a very creative graphic designer, and the other is a woman who is in charge of all the museums at Harvard University. And her mother's Mazatec from Huautla, and her father was this intellectual from the United States that fell in love with an Indian woman and married her. Well, their daughter got a heck of a great education, got a master's from UT Austin, matter of fact. And now she works for Harvard University in museums. So she knows how her people from her mom's side think, you know, Mazatec Indian. So I wrote the first draft in English, and then she said, nah, you should say it like this. You should say it like this. And then this guy that works on displays for national parks said, well, this is how you talk to tourists, you know. So all of it came together into this beautifully made and designed display that we went in and mounted on the wall, permanently on the wall in the government building. And like within 5 minutes of us doing that, people were already walking up and flipping through the pages. It's got one big picture on the wall that lures you over to it, and then on a very robust, very well made shelf is this Varro book, it's called, V-A-R-R-O, made in Omaha, Nebraska. And you leaf through these pages, and it just looks like something that you could walk up with a pick and hit it, and it's not going to hurt it. It's just made so strong for like a national park visitor center where maybe 1 million people a year will flip through it. And well, that excited the local government leader. Oh, wow, this is neat. Maybe this will draw tourists. So he got a newspaper article about it. I was interviewed on the radio about it, and it snowballed and grew beyond what we thought was going to happen. All of that's good for public relations. And we even had this real nice dinner that was thrown for us to thank us for coming there, to thank us for doing something for them, which is really nice that they understand that you know, we're not selfish explorers there to just exploit. If they can get something out of it, great. And they asked me, how could we draw tourists here? And I tell them, you could. There's a certain section of this cave. The cave is, as known now, is 71 kilometers long, which is about 45 miles long. That's a long cave. But of that, there's one section where the biggest rooms are, where the best waterfalls are, where the best rapids are, most scenic stuff is all in one little area of the cave. Happens to be the closest area to the city, to Huautla. However, it's really deep. You'd have to have a tunnel 1 mile long. Well, that's is expensive. But when they come to us and say, what can we do to get tourists here? We say, put a tunnel in, we'll tell you how to commercialize it. And there's also all the water in the world there. There's a tremendous amount of water which is just running off inside the mountains and coming out in a canyon miles to the south. If they could capture that water, then they've solved 2 problems with 1 tunnel. I'm so thankful, everybody in the expedition is so thankful that Whole Earth came through for us as a sponsor. This t-shirt was something that was made for our expedition, and all expedition team members got one, and also we had enough shirts for local people, local community leaders, and the children in the village where we had field houses rented. And we shot some GoPro footage with some GoPros that Whole Earth was generous enough to give us. We also had a bunch of other sponsors, and one that I'm impressed by is called Climb Tech, and they're right here in Austin, and they make technical climbing gear. And I switched from a Petzl upper ascender to a Climb Tech this year because every time there's a new model of Petzl, it seems to be harder to operate, to where the last one I got, it took 2 hands. And in a pinch, you want to be able to do it with 1 hand, and this Climb Tech is just smooth with 1 hand. And Collins Street Bakery sponsored us. What did they do for us? They gave us 50 pounds of really good Costa Rican coffee, which makes a more pleasant experience on the surface. If you've beaten yourself up in the caves and you've just climbed out from 2,000 feet deep and hauled a 40-pound pack, and you wake up in the morning, there's nothing like a good cup of coffee. And we had a 42-cup urn, which we added to our inventory last year, which is extremely popular. And we would make 2 urnfuls some mornings when everybody was on the surface. So we had a highly successful expedition. Our organization, PESH, that's the acronym, Proyecto Espeleologico Sistema Huautla, has a goal of having 10 annual expeditions in a row. And that would be from 2014 through 2023, those 10 years. We're 2 expeditions into that. We've learned some things. We've had 2 years of great success because we've had real good discoveries. So we got good momentum. We are hearing from a lot of people that want to join us. I gave a presentation at the Whole Earth store in San Antonio last night, and there was a guy sitting right in front of me in the front row who told me before I started showing slides that he'd gone caving 1 time before. And it was on a wild caving trip at Natural Bridge Caverns. Well, that's better than never having gone before, but not much better. And he said, how can I go on your next expedition? Well, I paused for a second and I said, well, I doubt that you'll be ready for the next expedition. But that's not to say that down the road in a couple of 3 years, you couldn't get yourself ready. People have done such things. But the first thing you got to think about is going underground and going in as many caves as you can and get that experience level up. Because there's a way you walk, there's a way you move, there's just got to be built into you so it's almost intuitive to be in that environment because it's so different than what you're used to. And you got to outfit yourself. And I had a table covered with equipment. I said, see all that stuff over there? That's all mine. My personal equipment. And everybody that was on the expedition had their own personal equipment just like that. So we don't have equipment to just loan you when you come. I might take an extra helmet or an extra rappelling device because somebody might lose something. And we don't want them to just have to stay on the surface now because they don't have a helmet. So I might have a couple of extra pieces of gear, but you got to be equipped. So if you're serious about this, join the club that's here in San Antonio. And there's one in Austin, there's one in Dallas, there's one in Houston, there's a caving club. Get to know the people, go caving as often as you can. Because I've been a caver for over 50 years and I still go caving as often as I can to keep my chops up, as a musician would say. You know, I like all caves, big and small, and they all add to my experience level. So if somebody wants to do it, it's possible. It's just they got to pursue it and really be forthright about it and do a lot, and you could get yourself there.